Welcome to Elisha's Space podcast, where we explore fascinating stories of individuals making a difference. In today's episode, we have the privilege of introducing Dr. Jeremy Butler, an inspiring figure making a significant impact on the University of Arizona campus. Dr. Butler holds an earned doctorate and currently serves as a campus missionary, supporting and guiding students in their spiritual journeys. With a diverse background, including pastoring and holding various positions within multiple churches, Dr. Butler brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion. However, what sets him apart is his openness about his personal journey with bipolar I disorder and his own battles with depression. Join us as we delve into Dr. Butler's remarkable story of triumph over adversity and how he uses his experience to inspire and empower others.
Hello, audience of Elisha Space. Thank you for joining us today for another great and fantastic episode. So today I have Dr. Jeremy Butler. He is currently a campus missionary at the University of Arizona. He has worked in various positions at different churches. And throughout this time, he's been diagnosed as having bipolar I and has had some challenges with depression. So I am so excited that he can share with us his testimony and his story, and that as a result, you can be encouraged and get some nuggets of healing as we talk within this journey. So I welcome you, Jeremy, with joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. Could you share a little bit about your journey? How did you get to where you are today?
Oh, that's a great question. First of all, I was born in Oklahoma, and I grew up in some people would say a religious household, a Christian household. I went to church regularly, and a lot of people now say they were forced to go and didn't enjoy it. I always had a good experience with church most of the time. It's like anything else. If you have good experiences 99% of the time, there's going to be always the 1% that you won't, if that makes sense. And I am an only child, so that makes life interesting when you're an only child, because my parents are quite a bit older than most of my other friends' parents, so that made life interesting too. But when I was growing up, I had an aunt that was bipolar, except they called it manic depressive at the time. And what they really called it was she was crazy. And we use that word crazy sometimes, say, oh, that person's crazy, but it wasn't a positive way they said it. She basically was just thrown in a mental institution, wasn't given help. But I say that to say this, no one really, when I was growing up, really talked about mental illness, at least in the church.
Oh,
and all
especially
this.
in the church.
And
Right.
and when I was 16, I had a friend commit suicide. And the thing is it really wasn't talked the difference between depression and grief. With grief, there is depression that can go with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt what we would call clinical depression with that. It was separate than grief, if that makes sense.
It does.
Because nobody wanted to talk about my friend had committed suicide. Hardly. Most people didn't want to talk about him. Let's just forget it happened. And I wanted to talk about it. So that's really when I really first felt depression when I was 16 that I remember. But it really didn't flare up until I was older. And most people who are bipolar, by the time they're 25, they're diagnosed. I was almost 40 because I went to graduate school. I did stuff in churches. I was a missionary overseas, got married in that time, and moved to New Mexico. And I worked really long hours. I taught school. I pastored 2 churches, which, by the way, if you have high levels of stress, it magnifies mental illness. And so during that time, my wife sat down with me and she said, something is not normal with you. And basically, I'd go through 3 or 4 weeks at a time, sleeping about an hour a night. I'd have 5 or 6 things going on. I'll go in the middle of the night to the gym 2 or 3 times, which some of your listeners might say, what's wrong with that? Our gym was an hour away. I would randomly go do things, like just randomly, like without telling anybody. So my wife would wake up and just be like, "Where's my husband at?" She would call me. I'm like, "I'm at Denny's 2 hours away eating breakfast at 4 a.m." Have trouble concentrating. I've always gone from one idea to the next, like ramble a lot, but it got really bad. That's the mania. Then I crashed and had depression and slept like 12, 14 hours a day for about 2 weeks. And my wife said lovingly, it wasn't mean. This might sound mean, but it wasn't. She says, either we'll go to your doctor or we'll take you to the emergency room. So I went to the doctor and they did blood work and I said, I'm depressed. And he sent me a psychiatrist. Find out I was also diabetic. So that plays into that. There's a high rate of between bipolar and diabetes, heart conditions. And that's partly because they don't know 100%, but partly because it's harder for people with bipolar to eat correctly, sleep well, all that. Basically, over the next 2 or 3 months, my psychiatrist, she did some tests. She did more blood work, talked with me. She said, I think you're bipolar, but she wanted to do a brain scan because she says, I don't want to rule out anything like a brain tumor. I know that sounds scary, but she wanted to make sure that before she gives me medicine that's for something that I don't have something else. And so that was about a 2-month process. And I finally started taking some medication. And my medication I've taken has helped me. It's not a silver bullet. I say it's like this. I tell people, if you drink lots of caffeine, it can help wake you up, but it'll never do the job of sleep. So a mood stabilizer that I'm on is it helps regulate things. But if I don't do things like eat better, I've lost about 120 pounds the last 6 or 7 years. Exercise, if I don't talk to a counselor, all these things help with it. Medicine isn't going to do what it should. Medicine isn't a silver bullet. It's an aid like the others. And that's what I tell people. And thankfully, I had a good doctor that explained it that way, that it's a holistic approach. And it was very embarrassing. How can I be a pastor and be bipolar? Now I don't really care. I'm like, I have it. It is what it is. Maybe I can help people. But it was very embarrassing to me at first because I felt like a failure.
Why did you feel like a failure?
And that kind of went to some other questions. I hit on that a little bit later. I just thought I'm here to help other people. And I just felt ashamed needing help, to be honest. But all of us need help at times. And if you need help and don't take it, that's the first step in getting help with anything. One of my friends who's been clean from drugs and alcohol for years said that the only way he got help was when he told somebody, I need help. I don't know how to get help, but I need it. That's the first thing I tell people is you might not know how to get help, but knowing that you need it and seeking it is the first step. I guess you could say it's pride on my part. I didn't want to be embarrassed and basically make people think less of me. And that's really bad. Here I was supposed to help people and I wouldn't seek the help I needed. I did, and it's not been perfect, but it's been a lot better. And I sleep better. I eat better. I've moved here now to be a campus missionary here at the University of Arizona. And it's a big campus, 51,000 students, but it's a job that I really love doing. And I did love pastoring, but when you're having to work 3 jobs to make a living and you're working 100 hours a week, it's not conducive to life in the long term. And that's why I tell people you have to find rest and things you enjoy from time to time. And that looks different to everybody.
Absolutely.
So that's my journey.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So let's touch on that topic of failure and that you felt like because you are a leader, you felt like you were a failure because you needed help. That's interesting to me. What was the journey around that brought you on the other side of that?
I think it was threefold. I grew up in a church setting that never said if you have health problems or if you need help, you're a failure. I never grew up in that. But, here in America, I grew up in a culture where it's pretty popular the last 40 years to hear people say, if you have any health problems, any type of problem, you just need more faith and need to pray it away, which I feel like is really not helpful at the very least and is very damaging to a lot of people, if that makes sense.
It does, because I'm trying to think of how to say it because I know people are also well-meaning when they make that statement, but it's like something is wrong with you because you have these challenges, or you must have committed some kind of a sin,
Yeah.
or you get where I'm coming from? Like it's something shameful.
Yes.
And I think it's changing now, but only because of the new messages that are going out. We're seeing more church leaders talking about it and trying to make it more normal. You know what I'm saying? But I think there's quite a few people that will get up and will say, "Can you please pray for me? I have a diagnosis of cancer," for example.
Hmm.
And people will get together and pray for that person. We'll use the phrase lay hands on them and
Hmm.
pray for them. But if someone is struggling with depression, or if someone has been diagnosed with a mental illness disorder, that person, a lot of times, they don't feel like they can go up to the altar and ask for prayer.
That's very true. And as a person of faith, I want to encourage people to ask for prayer. I think people should, but I agree with you. It's hard because some people are just more private than others. Some people are wired that way. I'm not. I'm not wired that way, but some people are. But secondly, you said people mean what they do, but there's just so much misinformation on the internet. And
Yeah.
and I just try to explain to people, sometimes if you don't know what to say to people, just say, "Hey, I love you. How can I help you?" And sometimes it's as much as that. And don't be afraid to ask people if they come to you and say, "I have bipolar," and they're telling you that, say, "I don't know what that is. Please explain that to me, what that means to you." Because so many people don't understand how to help people with that. And people can mean well, but sometimes it's like my parents, they really do mean well. But
Hmm.
they'll show you their old schoolness. They're born in the 40s, and the idea was just work through it. And there's truth to
Right.
that. There is
Right.
truth. There is truth to that. A lot of times we just
Absolutely.
have to work through it and just wait through our depression. But sometimes I didn't want you to tell me that. I just want to tell you I'm horrible today, and I just want to tell you. Does that make sense? And so my parents even have learned, when I'm telling them I'm having a bad day, just say, "Okay." And then we just talk about something else afterwards. So it's a learning process for everybody. So I say that to people who listen to say, I've told some people some bad advice. All of us have. We can all just learn to help people better, if that makes sense. So don't, if you've given people bad advice, don't beat yourself up over it. Just sit here and think, oh, maybe they just need me to listen to them and maybe take them out to get something to eat or hang out with them or whatever. And I think, secondly, you hit on something too, is I think many people in faith traditions think that if they have faith in God, nothing bad will happen to them. One of the greatest preachers in the 1800s in England, named Charles Spurgeon, who I read about, he would be diagnosed probably with bipolar today. Went through long periods of depression. And people have been there before. I just say, if it helps you, read people who've been through it before and realize you're not the first one. And it's okay to know that you're suffering through something other people have. And yeah, I just encourage people to see a doctor. I'm not saying medicine's always the cure. There might be other things going on
Mhm.
that are there that attribute to, if my blood sugar's up, my depression is worse, if that makes sense. There
It
might be other things
does.
going on, but I tell people I'm a pastor, I'm a missionary, but I'm not a professional doctor. I have to learn when I can say to people, encourage them, maybe you should go seek professional help and get some labs run just to see if there's something going on. And that's attributed to making it worse than it is. I think that's helpful to people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as someone who's had been diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, and you touched on the fact that you've had some experiences with depression as well, which is also part of the
Mhm.
disorder, by the way, audience. How has your mental health journey influenced how you see things with your faith? How has it influenced your ministry and even like your day to day interactions with others?
I always say to people, it's a blessing and a curse. I say that because sometimes people who have bipolar or mental illness need to learn to laugh a little more and to laugh at ourselves. But the bipolar, you have those highs and low lows. And people who just go through depression, I shouldn't say just, but when they have depression without mania, the depression is not worse for people who have bipolar. It just makes it seem worse because you're coming off a high where you feel invincible and you go through depression. It's not worse. But I say that to say that when I go through, I feel like I'm more creative than some people in some ways, and I have lots of ideas. And I go from idea to idea. And so the students I work with understand that. And so they can laugh and be like, that's just Jeremy. So I say there's a blessing there because I see things a little bit differently. And also, I say part of the blessing is when I talk to students who are bipolar and they're having struggles, I can empathize with them. I might not understand their exact case, but I can say I understand a lot of where you're going through. And also, the curse is that you just have to learn how to deal with the highs and lows, and it's going to be there. And realize people say, I wish I was normal. And I'm like, I don't know what normal is. But I do understand that sentiment. You wish you weren't having to go through the highs and to hit the lows. But it's colored the way I see things because I guess I've learned to embrace it. I have it. I can't do anything about it. I can work on it, be better. I just see things differently than other people. And many people who have it are very creative. I'm not creative as far as music or other things, but I have lots of ideas about just go through my brain. And so I harness that energy and just try to use it when I go through those times to get work done.
I think about that scripture talks about where Jesus said, in this world you will have troubles. So people that think that it's an easy life, it's not going to be an easy life. In this world you will have troubles, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. Mm-hmm. And because we are in him, we are overcomers. So I hold on to that a lot too. When you said, I just want to be normal. I don't know what normal is.
Yeah.
What is normal? I think this is normal. Living is normal. Facing challenges and problem solving, that's normal. Learning how to function, that's normal. You know what I mean? What's not normal is giving up, quitting. You see what I'm saying? That's not normal. So I think probably the definition of normal needs to be redefined because I don't think there's such a thing as normal.
Yeah.
I think what's normal is the unnormal things. That's normal.
So true. I tell students all the time, some of them wish they were more extroverted or whatever, and I said, be who God made you.
Absolutely.
I tell our introverted students, y'all do things better than I do. Like me being extroverted and bipolar, I can talk to lots of people, but I struggle with quietness. I struggle with, sometimes it's hard. I can be like, I talked to that person 3 weeks ago, but who are they again? Where some of our introverted students can have a 4-hour conversation with a person and they're good at it. And so again, what is normal? That's so true. And yeah, like just realizing you do have troubles at times. It's made other troubles, I guess, seem different. But just tell my students I have it and showing it, like when they see me struggle with things, I think it helps them realize they can be sincere and open up with struggles too and help each other.
So throughout your various roles and ministry and your personal journey, do you have any specific scriptures or passages or teachings that have been particularly meaningful to you or have helped you in some challenging times?
Yes, I have two main ones, but there's a lot. I tell people there's a couple websites you can go to. One's called openbible.info. You can just type Open Bible and type in a subject and it'll give you the verses. And a website called God Questions. You can type in a subject and it'll give you examples. Those will be helpful if you need to know more verses. But I think the Psalms are really good for people because they hit on so many human emotions. But I think my two favorite is in Hebrews chapter 4. It talks about Jesus being our high priest. And it says that he went through all of our struggles. He was tempted in every way, but did not sin, but he sympathizes with us. And it reminds me of Luke chapter 11. I believe it's Luke chapter 11, where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And there's a little verse there that says, might be John chapter 11, but where Jesus says Jesus wept. And people think, why is he weeping? Because Lazarus, he knew where Lazarus was. He was sad because the people were sad. And I think we gloss over that in the Western world because, at least in America, because even if we have hard times, some of us have never been through many things that many people like sub-Saharan Africa have been through, who've lost their whole family or what different places. But that's comforted me to know that Jesus wept with people who were in pain. And I think we forget that we have a Savior, we have a God that empathizes and cares for us. And that gives me comfort.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful teaching. A powerful teaching. I'd also like to add to that Elijah
Mm-hmm.
in the Bible, not Elisha, not the one I meant named after, but Elijah, the one who was in the cave. He had some severe depression,
Mm-hmm.
even to the point of suicide. And the Psalms, I agree with you, is very good to look at because David went through, you could see his anxiety and you can see his depression. If you think about it, his experience, he wasn't even in mid 20s, I believe, and he was kicked out of his own country. I think that would depress and give anybody
Mm-hmm.
anxiety.
Very
I think,
true.
I mean, we're both in the United States. I have moments where I think, oh, I think I'd like to move to such and such a country. But then I think about, to my core, I'm an American and I really don't want to learn another culture. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So yeah, that's a lot to think about too. So he's someone to study through the scriptures
Mm-hmm.
as well. The audience is reading his story. I would also say, I'm trying to think of who else would be good. And you can
Well,
jump in if you can think of any.
Lamentations, the book of Lamentations with Jeremiah.
Yep,
Uh,
Job with
yeah.
Job.
I always tell people if you have listeners that listen to heavy metal, I have a chart somewhere that shows books of the Bible on the top of metal, and it says Lamentations because it's very. When you first read Lamentations, it's very discouraging, but then you read it and it's like, no, it is, but it isn't because it shows that we can show our emotions to God, and He already knows them anyways. And there's a lot of places, and in fact, you read even the Gospels, and I just think, my goodness, Jesus was patient. I feel a lot like Peter. I do so many things. Peter meant well. He told Jesus, "No, you will not die. I will
Right.
not do this, Jesus." And what happened? He was
Made
a
him
great
into a ruler.
failure. And then, from the outsiders looking in, people say, one author I read said, Peter was the greatest failure in his own mind. But if you read in Mark's account of the resurrection, Jesus says, "Go tell the disciples and Peter to come meet me." Why did he say that? Because Jesus knew what he was thinking. In his own mind, he was a failure. And then what did Peter do? He was used by God at Pentecost. And so, yeah, I just think, yeah, we have so many examples of people that failed greatly in the Bible and throughout history, but we're still successes in life. And sometimes life is going to be hard and sometimes we're going to mess up, but that's life. And we have to, I think, as a church, as Christians, give each other grace and help each other. And
That's a huge one, giving each other grace.
yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying, don't take me out of context here. Look, I had a friend that was in jail in the penitentiary for years.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that there's times that people aren't going to pay for consequences of their actions and that you're going to have to help them by not enabling them. I'm not saying enable people, but sometimes we can be too hard on people we don't understand. I've never struggled with alcoholism or drug addiction, but other people have. And if they're seeking help, we should help them and empathize with them. And does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Don't enable them, but empathize with them. Have grace towards them because they might be trying to get help. They may just not know how to get help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One last question. I appreciate everything you're sharing with me. This has just been such a valuable conversation. Before I ask the question, I'm just going to quickly summarize. Something I think that you've done is, first of all, you had a great support system with your wife. She's part of your tribe. She's
Mm-hmm.
part of your community. And then also, too, you just got really into your faith and got a better understanding of the Lord and how much He cares for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that has helped significantly in your healing journey. Is that correct? Oh, and medication.
Yes, very true.
Okay.
Sleep, diet, everything. There's a lot that goes into that. But yes, all that combined.
Okay. And my last question is there a resource that, or what has helped you as far as a book or a website or a teaching specifically that the audience can go to? If you can't think of anything, it's okay. But I was just wondering if you had it in your mind.
Yes, I do. Let me get the book real quick. Now, this is called Understanding and Loving a Person with Bipolar Disorder.
Okay.
And it's
Who's
from
that?
Stephen Arderburn and
Okay.
Becky Light Brown. And I can email you a link to it.
Okay, that would be great. And
Yes.
audience, what I'll do is in the show notes, I will make sure to put link in there so you can purchase the book. Now,
Yeah.
is this book, and it's okay if it's not a faith-based, but just so the audience knows, is this a faith-based book or is it just pretty much information?
No, it is a faith-based book. It's
Oh,
by Christians. Stephen Arderburg he's a founder of a ministry called New Life Ministries, which does Christian counseling and stuff. And I'll email you that as well.
okay.
But it's more for people. It's helped me too, but it's more for people who have people in their life who is bipolar, and I think it'll really help them understand what to help them, if that makes sense.
It does.
Um, and I read it too, and it opened my eyes up, and I thought, wow, it makes me understand myself a little bit. But it
Mhm.
helped me to understand what my wife and other people are going through with me, if that makes kind of help me understand them a little bit. But that's helpful. And I was going to say just another thing is too with that is if you don't mind me piggyback off of this, but I think something that's helpful is to just tell people that are close to you. Start with a few if you have this, like bipolar, just tell them because I think it's powerful to let people know. But also, what was very helpful to me is I called a couple of my friends, people I grew up with that are medical doctors, and I just talked with them. They're Christians. I'm not saying they have to be, but just if you know some medical doctors, even they're not psychiatrists, but are somebody, a licensed counselor, or a doctor, or psychiatrist, even you know someone personally that would sit and talk with you and say, I'm going through this. I'm not sure if what I have, that might be helpful, but let's say you've been diagnosed bipolar. If you can sit down and talk with them, if it's someone you trust, that might be helpful because they might be able to help you talk through from a medical perspective. That was
I
helpful to me very much because I wanted to talk to my other people I knew, their doctors. Is this the right approach? What would you do? And I got a second opinion. That's just me, though. I told the psychiatrist I'm going to go see someone else too because not that I don't trust people, but it's just like I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. And that really helped me.
absolutely.
That really helped me is just talking to my friends who are doctors, medical doctors, and they're like, yeah, you need to be on medicine. It's okay to be on medicine. And they said, look at it this way, at least in the short term, yes. Long term, we can figure that out. But short term, you need to be on it for you because people with bipolar have like 10 to 20 times higher rate of death by suicide than the
Right.
national population.
Right.
And that is sobering. And I'm like, wow, and so I think just doing that in New Life today, like they have counselors they recommend, they have resources, they have a radio program you can call and ask questions. And they're one of the ones that encourage me to start with a small group, but start to be more open with it, to listen to good professional advice. And from a Christian perspective, they told me that, and it really helped encourage me in that regard.
That's good. That's a great resource.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good resource. Of course, with me being a licensed counselor, I am hugely a proponent of talking to a professional, a mental health professional, talking to someone who's aware so
Mm-hmm.
that they can guide you through your healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say, because a lot of times there's different things that come up, like hallucinations and things like that. And just being able to talk those things out can help you with processing with what's going on. So most definitely talking with someone, I believe personally, and I guess I'm biased, I believe everyone should see a counselor or a therapist to help you process these days.
What's the worst thing that can happen? You go to one and see one for a couple times, and they say maybe you should just come once a year and for a checkup. And I guess to me that'd be the greatest thing that could happen. But I guess the thing about it is maybe some of us are afraid to hear maybe you need help, but that's okay though if you need help because all of us do in something.
There's always something and there's always trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we live in a fallen world.
Yeah.
So just trying to figure out the brokenness of the world we live in and processing what we see and experience can be a healing thing.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I'll say this, there's talking about now YouTube, this is not a Christian perspective. I
It's
don't
okay.
think the guy's a Christian that runs it, but there's a YouTube channel called Polar Warriors, and you can edit this out if you
Oh,
don't
Polar
want people.
Warriors. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I like the name already.
But
Yeah.
he's bipolar. And I just want to tell you before you go watch, there are some videos with some language, and he talks about things that bipolar people go through, like sexual issues. So I'm just saying, don't watch it with your kids because he really talks about it. But he has things like some advice on how to help, things that people with bipolar go through. It's one of the few YouTube channels that I would recommend to people. And there's a couple of other people on there that are like psychiatrists that have them. To me, I like people that have done their research or who are really certified to do it. Because you're going to find lots of bad information on anything on YouTube. And there's lots of great too. But I'm just saying, just be careful. But yeah, he has some really interesting videos and I'll watch them. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I've never gone through the sexual addiction part of it or the drug addiction part, which is a higher rate in bipolar. But now I can understand, wow, you summed up 10 things or several things not to say to people with bipolar. Some things I could think about, just some things to help other people to help people with bipolar. Or it's just, they're fun videos and they're really a good perspective for someone who has it. And I don't know if he's a Christian or not. I'm just saying, like, I don't see really much in there from a faith perspective. And so he dives into some very adult conversations. So I'm just want people to know that, if that makes sense.
I don't think we should be scared to have these adult conversations, even in these faith-based communities.
No.
It's what's happening.
Yep. But I just want people to know that so they're not watching it with their kids.
It's much appreciated. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me on Elisha Space. I loved hearing your story. I love learning more about what you do. I think it's amazing and fantastic. And this cycle of your journey, you're reaching out to the college students and sharing with them the love of God within your own experiences and things of that nature. I think it makes you probably more organic to them. So thank you so much for joining. And audience of Elisha Space, I would like to take a moment to just continue to encourage you, to just continue to give you hope. And as you keep going forward within your journey, I hope and I pray that your healing gets stronger and stronger, and that you go from faith to faith and from glory to glory in greater peace, love, and joy. Be well.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll subscribe so we can keep the conversation going. Now go, move forward in your healing journey.